Buongiorno studenti! Today we're looking at something extremely interesting, which is phrases that are perfectly polite in English but can make you sound rude in Italian. Now, these expressions are particularly tricky because they are correct in your native language, but they just don't work the same way in Italian. As always, I'm committed to make you understand these crucial differences between English and Italian so that you can speak more authentically and confidently. If you like this, then make sure to subscribe to my channel and enable notifications. You will get fresh weekly lessons that will help you navigate these tricky language differences. Also, let me know in the comments which one of these phrases surprised you the most. Iniziamo. Let's begin. Okay, phrase number one that you want to avoid in Italian if you don't want to sound rude is voglio. Let me show you this. So, voglio is the verb volere, which means to want. So, voglio is present tense and means I want. Now, in English, if you say, I want this, for example, I want a coffee, that's perfectly fine. But in Italian, if you translate that literally and you say, voglio un caffè, that's going to sound like a demand. So, in Italian, voglio, just saying voglio to someone else is considered very rude. Now, this is so important in our culture that we have an old saying that all Italian children learn when they are young, which is this. Let me show you. L'erba voglio non cresce nemmeno nel giardino del re. Now, probably this should be spelled like this for better understanding. L'erba voglio non cresce nemmeno nel giardino del re. What does that mean? Literally, that means the herb I want doesn't grow even in the garden of the king. Now, what's the deeper meaning of this weird old phrase? It means that even the king has to ask for something in a more polite way. Even the king cannot just say voglio, even though he's the king, because that would be considered very rude. Now, nowadays in Italy, we don't have a king anymore, but we still have this saying, and so voglio is still considered very rude. So, what should you say instead? Whenever you want something from someone else, don't use voglio, but use this other expression instead. Vorrei. Vorrei. Now, vorrei is still the same verb. It's still the verb volere, which means to want. But it's a different conjugation. It's a different tense. So instead of using present tense, io voglio, I want, we use conditional. Vorrei, I would want. Conditional tense is the politeness form in Italian. We always use the conditional when we want to ask for something from someone else in a polite way. So by rephrasing your sentence, by not saying I want a coffee, but I would want a coffee, you're going to sound perfectly polite in Italian. So let me show you an example phrase. Let's suppose you want to say, I want a table for two. How would you say that? How would you ask that? That will be vorrei un tavolo per due. That's the most correct form to say this in Italian. Then if you want, you can add per favore, please, but using vorrei already shows a good degree of politeness. Perfetto. Okay. Espressione numero due, expression number two, that's going to make you sound rude in Italian. And that's saying ciao to everyone. Now, I know probably everyone in the world knows this word. If there's one word, Italian word that everyone knows is ciao. The problem is that ciao is not as much used in Italian as you may think. Now, in English, if you say hi, that works pretty much with anyone. So you can use that in an informal context, and you can use that in a formal context. But in Italian, ciao is very informal. Ciao is supposed to be used only with friends and family. And I know most people, most non-native speakers are not aware of this, but ciao is very, very informal. So what should you use instead if, for example, you're dealing with people you have never met before, so with strangers, or you are in very formal contexts? Now, there are several ways of greeting people in Italian with different degrees of formality, but the one that I always recommend is buongiorno. Or buonasera, of course, depending on the part of the day. So good morning or good evening, good night. Now, buongiorno and buonasera are perfect because they are not informal, they are not too formal or too stiff, and they show a high degree of kindness and being nice because you're saying to people, good day. So buongiorno and buonasera always work. They are a great way to greet people, even if you are in a more formal context. So drop the ciao and use buongiorno and buonasera instead. By the way, if you want to easily review all the phrases that we are learning today and the wrong ones and what to say instead, don't forget to download the PDF that I have prepared for you for this lesson. You can download it by using the link that I'm going to leave in the description of this video. Okay, let's move on. Espressione numero 3. Well, more than an expression, this is a mistake. And the mistake is to use tu with strangers. So what do I mean with that? Now, in English, you have one way of saying you. And that works, and I'm talking about singular you, so when you're talking to one person. Now, in English, you just have one form. You say you, and that works with your brother, and it works with the lawyer you are consulting. It's the same you. In Italian, it's not that easy. We actually have two forms for you, singular you. So one form is tu, and the other one is lei. Tu is the informal you. And that's called that way because tu is only used with family and friends. With strangers, and especially with older people who are strangers, not your nonna, but someone who's older than you and is a stranger, you should use lei. And using lei instead of tu shows them proper respect. That's what the formal you in Italian is. Now, what does that mean in practice? In practice, this means that when you phrase your questions, for example, to a stranger, you don't use the conjugation for tu, but you use the conjugation for lei. Now, let me show you this with an example. Let's suppose you want to say, can you help me? Now, the first thing that most students do is that they phrase this as puoi aiutarmi? So this is the informal you. We usually drop the subject pronoun in questions, but that's what the conjugation is. So tu puoi aiutarmi or just puoi aiutarmi? Now, this is very direct and informal, and we would only use this with family and friends. How can we change that? How can we rephrase that for strangers? We simply switch from puoi to puoi, which is second person singular, informal you, to lei, which is third person singular, and that's also used as the formal you. So that would become, let's take a little bit more space. Lei può aiutarmi? Or just può aiutarmi? See, the difference in the ending from puoi to può is what it means to change from tu to lei. And that's how you're going to show the other person respect by using the formal you with them. Now, if you want to learn more phrases for conversation where I explain the difference between formal and informal, I have some dedicated videos that you may like. I'm going to add them in the description below too. Now, let's move on to the fourth expression that's going to make you sound rude in Italian if you translate that literally. And that is asking what. So in English, if you are not sure that you have understood the other person correctly, you can just say, what? Well, if you translate that literally in Italian and you ask, cosa? Or even if you say that less dramatically and say just cosa, that's going to sound rude because we only use cosa when we are like, what are you saying? What you're saying really stupid. That's when we would say cosa. So don't do that if you just want to make sure that you understood correctly, because you're going to give them the impression that you're not approving what they're just saying. So what should you use instead? Don't use cosa, but use come, scusi. Come, scusi. You can also switch the order. So for example, scusi, come, still good. So what does that mean? Literally, that means how. Excuse me. Now, I know this doesn't make any sense in English, but that's how we phrase that. So we would say how, like, how did you say that? How, it doesn't even make sense in English. It's just a different way we ask this. Instead of using the more direct what, we just we use how to sound less direct, and then we add excuse me, because we want to make sure that we are asking them to clarify their point. So remember, don't use cosa, what, but just use come, scusi, and you will be perfectly polite. And if you want, you can also add può ripetere? Can you repeat? And notice that we're still using the formal you, so it's can you with the formal you, può ripetere. So this clarifies even further that you're asking for a clarification because you didn't understand them, you're not sure you understood them. Okay, now these expressions might seem like small differences, but they do make a huge impact on how Italian native speakers perceive you. If you master these distinctions, you will notice that people will start treating you with more warmth and respect. So now let me know in the comments which one surprised you the most. And if you want more insights into the Italian language and culture, then make sure to subscribe to my channel for new lessons every week that will help you understand the real differences between English and Italian. And I will see you in the next video. Ci vediamo al prossimo video. Ciao da Valentina!